You're listening to Thunderquack Podcast Network.
Hey, I'm Steve Englehart, and you're listening to the Epic Marvel Podcast.
Hello, welcome to the Epic Marvel Podcast. This is the Fantastic Four, episode 18A. Covering the first half of the epic collection called The More Things Change. This is a period of the Fantastic Four from 1987 to 1988. I'm your host, Kurtis Findley.
And I'm your Fantastic Four host, Eric Findley.
What issues are we talking about today?
Well, we are talking about the Marvel graphic novel, Hulk vs. Thing, or Hulk Thing, and Fantastic Four issues 308 to 312.
Now, when I talked about this one, what I've been doing recently in my podcasts is now breaking the epic collections in half, having 2 episodes per epic collection. I've been trying to do them all in one, but first of all, that makes a tremendously long episode, especially when I have to edit it afterwards. Mm-hmm. And it's also a lot for me to read. I was doing them one every 2 weeks. So essentially I'm reading the same amount, but it feels like I don't have to read as much or something.
Yeah, you don't have to remember as much.
Yeah, that's true too. But when I was looking at this and I was asking you, when is a good breaking point? And you're saying, well, either we break it really early before the Belasco and Master Pandemonium story or after it, just before the Secret Wars number 3.
Any measurement of, quote, the middle of the book is right in the middle of that story.
Right. So I opted to put the breaking point right after issue number 312. It's called Turning Point. That issue is called Turning Point. So there is a natural progression from where the characters are into the beginning of this book to where they're going to go into the end of this book. That means we only really have 5 issues to talk about today, plus the Marvel graphic novel. So this may be a shorter episode, and the next one may be a little bit longer, but I think this will give us room to breathe, and also the back half of this book goes in a very, very different direction. So it's good to kind of split the conversation into 2.
Right.
Okay, so what do we need to know about this book, about Fantastic Four in this period before jumping into this book?
So particularly if this is your first Fantastic Four book, one of the key things to know is that Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Woman are not in this book.
Right.
They have left the team in order to try to raise their son, Franklin, in a, quote, normal environment, and they've placed Ben in charge. Ben then recruits former member Crystal, the Inhuman, and his former partner from the Thing ongoing series, Sharon Ventura, who is now going by Miss Marvel. 2 things to know about them. Sharon received her powers in the Thing series from a mysterious character named the Power Broker. He would addict his clients to a drug that would slowly turn them into like mutant monster thingies unless they regularly came back for his antidote. And she and Captain America went to stop the Power Broker in Captain America 330, 331. By the way, this is when Captain America was known as the Captain. And while they were successful in stopping the Power Broker, she was raped by the Power Broker's henchmen, despite having her powers.
Right.
Crystal is an Inhuman with elemental powers. She was married to Quicksilver, and they're right now going through the process of a divorce because she cheated on him with a human, a real estate guy.
Yeah.
And that takes place in Vision and Scarlet Witch issues 6 to 12. Last thing to know about going into this one is that Latveria has been usurped from Dr. Doom by Christophe Bernard, a child who has Doom's memories implanted, who thinks that he is Doom because the process was incomplete. And that happened last volume in Fantastic Four Annual 20.
I guess you could also say that Johnny and Alicia Storm are newly married.
Right.
They are
That also happened last volume.
Yep, they are just moving into their apartment in this issue here.
And Crystal and Johnny used to date.
Yes, that's an important thing that'll come into play as well. So yeah, I mean, lots of stuff dating back to like really early issues of Fantastic Four.
Well, for Inhumans, then it goes back to like
the 60 plus issues.
Yes, yeah, 60 plus issues, and it's Doctor Doom. He goes back a long time. Yeah, Black Panther is in here as well, and he showed up in the early Fantastic Four issues as well.
Yeah, and so this is something that Steve Englehart loves to do, is play with the long-standing histories of these characters, and we'll see him do that really heavily in the next episode, for sure. And that's nice. I like the fact that he pays attention and that he's not kind of rebooting and restarting the characters over. He's playing on the characteristics that have been well defined with these characters for a long time.
Yeah, and that's part of what makes the Fantastic Four, in my opinion, so great, is that they develop these relationships. Like I've said before, Fantastic Four is about relationships. It's about family and friends, and Steve Englehart does a really good job of pulling those connections together.
Yep. So this is not the beginning of his run. The beginning of his run started in the last half of the previous epic collection called All in the Family, and this is just him kind of ramping up. And this run is notorious for having kind of a crash and burn at the end due to editorial interference and Steve Englehart's unwillingness to play ball. But this is not where we're at yet. This is still kind of good stuff from Steve Englehart,
This is
I think.
like the high point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to read some comments from people online. I asked on social media to give comments about this particular volume of Epic Collections. And so I have some comments that came across Twitter that relate to both this episode and what we'll talk about in the next episode, but I'm going to read them all here. Roy says, the story is a bit melodramatic and not the best Englehart. It's true, I do enjoy this, but it is not the best Englehart.
Yep.
But hey all, the saga that ends with Secret Wars 3 is great in terms of how he used continuity. Nobody could use past ideas like him to create new stories. In a few issues, he used the Comet Man from a failed miniseries, the Beyonders from the Grunwald stories, the Aliens from a fill-in closing story of Kazar, an Alien World from a crazy Morbius number from Steve Gerber, and it all made sense. It's just great. So he really liked the Secret Wars 3.
Nice.
And Sandrock74 says this era of Fantastic 3 was not my favorite. And that's that's just a reference that Crystal kind of backs out later on in the story. And then Brian Gooney says, not my favorite. As Thing admitted early on, he and Torch could smash and burn almost everything, but only Reed could outthink the FF enemies. Plus, that spiky Thing hide was an eyesore and looked impossible to draw. Couple comments there. Yes, Thing admitted it, but that was kind of the reason why Steve wanted to tell the story.
Yeah. And, it's a big part of sort of the Thing's character growth through this period. At one point, he mentions that, I have to make a decision about how we split up the group or if we're going together or what we're going to do. And Reed always does this. And I always sort of poke fun at him for doing that kind of thing or I give him a hard time for it. And now I understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it's important for him to be placed in this situation just so that he can learn a few things and respect Reed a little bit more or whatever,
And if he hadn't gone through this period, then he would still sort of be the outsider in the group that he was immediately before Steve Englehart's run.
Yeah. And then also to Brian's comment about the spiky hide looking like an eyesore. It's like, yeah, it does look a little weird, and I think it's supposed to. I mean, he's mutated more. He's supposed to look like an eyesore.
I've seen some really good renditions of it.
Yeah.
But because now instead of just rock hide, which is hard enough to draw and do facial expressions and all that, now it's actually each rock is a spike, and that really does make it messy with shadows and directions and things.
Yeah, and just the anatomy and stuff.
Yeah, and it's supposed to have like two suspenders almost of larger spikes and so placement and it does seem really messy. It can be done well, but I mean, if you're going to be doing a whole issue on a timeline, That's rough.
So for people like John Buscema and Keith Pollard, and especially Joe Sinnott, who are the kind of the architects of this design,
Right.
They get it.
Right.
But there's an issue of the Hulk in this one, and it just does not look great. So yes, not everybody grasped the concept.
Yeah.
Ryan says, not a fan of this. I hate the spiky transmutation of Ben. I hate Sharon becoming She-Thing. The only compelling part was Johnny and Crystal's longing for each other despite their marital statuses, reinforcing my belief that Johnny's marriage to Alicia was a terrible mistake. Yep, I think that's a good comment too. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, a lot of people blast this period for the fact that Thing mutates and the She-Thing or whatever. I mean, you know, it's just a story. Things will get put back to normal by the end of this creator's run, and that's,
everybody hated some modern ideas like Captain America Falcon and Jane Foster Thor. And
guess what? They didn't stick around.
They didn't stick around. And, you know, while they may not have admitted it at the beginning, that was the plan.
Of course. It always is the plan.
It's always the plan.
It's the only time things really, really stick around is if it really, really takes off with the public.
Yeah.
So Captain Marvel, for instance, being like Miss Marvel going into Captain Marvel, that really resonated with the audience, and it sold really well. So they're going to stick around. Wolverine with fire claws didn't resonate with the audience, so there's not going to stick around.
They didn't even change it back; they just dropped it.
Yeah. And the same thing, like we can make parallels to the way She-Hulk is being portrayed in the Avengers right now.
Yeah.
She's very big and bulky and looks like the Hulk. But that's just for a story. You know it's going to revert back to normal.
She's got the smaller vocabulary and everything of a Hulk. But then just in the recent Empire issue, there's something that goes on where all of a sudden she has a little bit more of her normal intelligence with her Hulk form.
Right.
So I don't know if that's going to be permanent or whatever, but, you know, quote permanent.
Yeah.
If that's going to become part of the new normal for her, or if she's going to go back to the dumb Hulk after the storyline, I don't know.
As soon as a story runs its course, it switches back.
Right. And at the very least, when the writer changes.
Yeah, and if it's popular enough, it'll stick around for maybe a little while longer, like Superior Spider-Man or something. But again, it always goes back.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more as we get into the issues about some of the reasons I think the different forms do work, while they're not my favorite.
Right.
But then somehow some of the story elements make it a little messy.
I guess now that I think about it, Sharon Ventura is still the She-Thing, right? To this day. She pops up in like the wedding of Ben and Alicia, and she's still a She-Thing.
She is.
So actually that transformation did stick around.
It did, yes.
So maybe everything I said doesn't even count.
Well, it's the more memorable form, I think, for her. Because, I mean, first of all, the Ms. Marvel name has really been attached to Carol Danvers and Kamala Khan now.
Right.
So you can't have her be Ms. Marvel.
Right. And she's not anything else really other than that.
Right. And nobody really remembers her as Ms. Marvel in her red and yellow blue, getup. They remember her as She-Thing.
Right.
Even if they don't remember her as the name Ms. Marvel, because she's still going by Ms. Marvel here.
Yeah.
They remember her as being the female version of the Thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess, and she's just kind of a nothing character as well. So it doesn't really matter what happens.
Like they're trying to do a lot with her, and again, we'll talk about this more later, but it's tough. So one quick comment on on Johnny though. I would agree. I think that the height of Johnny's marriage with Alicia is actually after she's revealed as a...
Spoiler alert.
Oh, right. Well, we've talked about that before. And
not for people who are new to the podcast and are listening to these episodes in order, in chronological order.
That's true. But, when he's actually like wrestling with, do I actually love this person? And comes to the conclusion, yes, I do. Now that I know the reality here, that I thought was the height of their relationship. And this part here is sort of eh.
But you have to lay the groundwork as well. And
totally.
This is also just Johnny being new to being married, where he comes from years and years, decades our time of being a ladies' man and stuff. So that's interesting to come to terms with that reality that he finds himself in, which we go through those motions in this volume.
Even during the engagement period, he's always passing by a pretty woman and just going, oh, she's really pretty. Oh, no, I'm engaged now.
Right.
And yeah, so it's a new adjustment.
Yeah, and then just after Steve Englehart's run, there's the whole Delilah story,
Right.
With Walt Simonson's issues and
Yes,
stuff. So
yeah.
it's just he has a lot of issues of his own that he has to kind of deal with. I think.
And again, if he didn't get married to Alicia, he would never change as a character, and he would just stay the young 20-something player that he has been.
Which he kind of is now still.
Yeah, not as much, but yes, a little bit.
I think he still is. If you are reading the Modern Fantastic Four, it's like that's he's not married, of course, anymore. Nope. Elijah she's been out of the picture for a while. She's recently back though.
Yeah.
But she's not involved with Johnny in that way.
We thought she was dead a couple of times, and she's not.
And we're getting way off topic here.
Yeah.
but they did that story where they go to that alien planet where he is forced to be married to.
He's got a soulmate.
Somebody else.
And honestly, they haven't. She's come back to Earth with them, and they haven't had the opportunity to spend a lot of time on that. But he actually does seem to care for her and think, hey, maybe this soulmate thing is something real, and I got to give it a shot.
But up until that point, he was still kind of the same ladies' man, and this, I think it's portrayed in Hickman's run as well, because he's like a rock star and
right.
All of that kind of stuff, and that's just kind of part of his character, and he has to have these relationships in order to grow as a character.
Yeah.
But then the writers kind of always set him back a little bit as well.
But I think that maybe we can just sort of end on this one here.
Okay.
I think that while that might be true, I think that he, as a character, has a better understanding of long-term relationships because of this, and knows now going into relationships, am I looking for a short-term? Am I looking for a long-term?
Yeah.
And before it was just, I'm just going to date and we'll see where it goes and whatever, and it ends up not lasting. It, as his character is, quote, burns hot and then dies out. And then now he's actually considering more, maybe I do want to settle down, and these are not necessarily like one-time flings. I think that's happening more often with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah.
When you have a character that's been around for 70 years.
Yeah.
It's like you want to grow the character and progress them as people, but not too much, because you don't want them to get too different from who they are and the character that we know and love.
But you also know that as a writer, you're not going to be on the book forever.
Right.
So you want to sort of get that growth done, that you see the potential and
in your time. Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's leave that behind us and move on to our issues. It's okay that we
space filler.
Yeah, exactly. Makes this episode a little bit longer because it's only 5 issues we're talking about today, or 6 technically with the graphic novel. But let's start with the graphic novel. And the first thing I want to do is just talk a little bit about its placement in the Epic collection as well. Was this a good way to start the book, or would you have preferred it to be at the end, or what? Because this is the thing, is like when you have regular issues with the Epic collections, because they're collecting the whole thing from start to finish, and a lot of these issues are so heavy in continuity, with these one-off stories like one-shots or even miniseries or annuals, stuff that doesn't actually tie into the main feature, the main story, where do you place it in a big fat collection like this? It has to kind of come at the end or at the beginning.
Now, this is really tough because we have the Thing in his, quote, normal look. Mm-hmm. And you can't necessarily put it in the previous Epic collection because that one's already big enough and the dates don't line up very well and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if you put it anywhere else in this,
he's mutated.
He's already mutated.
Right.
Because the first issue in this book starts that whole story off. So you can't put it in the middle or at the end. You have to put it at the beginning, but it's not really a great start to an Epic collection.
Right. But the question also then I have is, does it really matter if you put it at the end? Because people reading this would obviously understand that this is a one-off, maybe out of continuity story. Does it really matter if they put it at the end, even though the Thing is all rocky?
Maybe not. I don't know. It's a good question. It's a tricky question, and I just don't think it's a very strong start.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so this is called Hulk Thing: The Big Change, and is written by Jim Starlin, who of course is famous for Infinity Gauntlet and
all
everything
the
Thanos
and Silver Surfer.
Yeah, all of that stuff. And then it's drawn by Bernie Wrightson, who is a early Bronze Age comic artist who did a lot of like the horror kind of stories and monster stuff. And so really, really neat to see him do a Thing and Hulk story. He is a fantastic artist. And one of the treats also with these graphic novels is they're not printed with the same 4-color printing process because they use their magazine, they just use a different format. So you get actual full color, the full color printing process. So you can do a lot more cool stuff with the coloring on it. And the coloring is credited to somebody, let's see, Bernie Wrightson. There you go. Bernie Wrightson's doing the coloring. That's very cool. I like the fact that he gets the opportunity to do that himself.
Yeah, I was
Very
going to
nice.
say that the one of the things that I really noticed about this book is that he has fabulous facial expressions, especially for the Thing. And people often find it hard to do facial expressions for the Thing because of the rocky surface and everything. But he does it so well.
Very well. Okay, and Jim Starlin is one thing that he does really well is great action cosmic drama, but he also is a very funny guy. And if you read a lot of his Silver Surfer, he does go into some very amusing places with that title.
Yeah, there's the period where Silver Surfer, maybe you might want to cut this out because I'm not sure if this is Jim Starlin or not. There's a period where Silver Surfer was like a captive slave on a planet with like all these betting people, and they make their wagers and things.
Yep.
And one of the main, I guess the host, he's a really quirky, strange guy
With the smiley face head.
Yeah.
That guy, yeah. So did you know that story is a rip on DC Comics?
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's if you go back and read it with the idea that DC Comics are slave drivers and don't pay their employees good wages or all this kind of stuff. Like, it's very, very interesting to read that commentary. And I felt there was a little bit of that commentary in this story as well.
Yeah.
So
I was wondering about that.
yeah, and I don't know the specifics, but yeah, there's a lot of that kind of bureaucracy and dealing with all of that, the legal issues behind the scenes with corporations and whatever.
Stealing ideas.
Stealing ideas, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's probably, this is a little bit before that Silver Surfer story, because that was in 91 or 92, I think. And this is 1987. So this would have been before, I can't remember the exact timeline of Jim Starlin's flipping back and forth between Marvel and DC, but it's around, he's probably feeling that. Or maybe it's a commentary on how Marvel was treating him at the time. I don't know. Okay, but so the story, let's see if I can get this. Thing and Hulk, both separately, are teleported to this planet called Maltriculon, and they are forced to, well, they're not forced, they're asked if they can deliver a legal summons to this shady corporation guy. And but that guy has been kidnapped by another guy, so they don't really know where he is, and so the Thing and the Hulk have to go tromping through the planet to try and find them. The whole story is told by the Watcher. He is the one who is telling it, and that's kind of makes it amusing as well, because it plays kind of like a what if issue or something like that a little bit.
Yeah.
There is some comedy as well. What does he say at the very beginning? He says, this is a great little monologue here. No empty boast is this. Maltriculon is a commercial, free-orbiting planet whose speciality is change. This home of the universe's master terraformers, alchemists, and shape-changers. Here they all live, and from here they all hire out their talents. I know this because I am the Watcher. I see all and record it for future generations. Some believe that I am only interested in tales of cosmic proportions. This is not so. I am also a keeper of small stories, human stories. By the time you finish reading this tome, you shall realize that I even save silly and trivial stories. No one's perfect.
Oops, I shouldn't have filed that one away.
Yeah. So that comes in like page 8 or 9 of the story after we see the teleportation of both of those people, and we also get a little brief recap of both of their origin stories, which is nice. And
this is one of 2 origin recaps for the Fantastic Four in this volume.
yeah, but that sets the tone of this story as well. This is a silly and trivial story.
It is so silly.
And then later on, he also the Watcher also gives us a little bit of exposition to tell us what is going on here. So here we go. This is the Watcher speaking. This particular tale involves individuals other than the 2 earthling behemoths. Behold, Stambin Malalet, a minor bureaucrat of the Federation of Maltriculon. It was he who sent for the Thing and the Hulk. The reason he has done so is that earlier today he was given an assignment, his first assignment in 15 Maltriculon years. Stambin Mallet is an expert at going unnoticed and being obscure. He had hoped this talent would get him through his pension without ever having to assume any responsibility for anything ever. His luck has run out. His name was chosen by lot to deliver a certain legal document. And here's where it gets confusing. The document is a legal summons for one Mal Addy, a scientist who had discovered the latest big change in nutrition. The government wants to make sure that this new find will be marketed fairly. They have fears that it won't be because their reports have come to their attention that Mal Addy had been kidnapped by Nasty McBurn. Nasty is a mean-spirited gangster who works for the infamous Banger McCrusher mob and food outlet. This situation has upset Stambin Mallet greatly. He has been forced to take on certain responsibilities which have put him in direct opposition with some of the worst cutthroats in the galaxy. This strikes him as a good way to get beaten to death, thus never reaching his all-important pension. But Stambin Mallet has survived 15 years in the jungle of Maltriculon commerce and has learned many a trick during that time. Now he calls upon the one maneuver that has never failed him. It is time to delegate responsibility. So that's why he's called the Thing and the Hulk.
Yeah, to delegate his responsibility to them. But the whole idea that his lease on life is just do your work, don't be too good so that you'll be given responsibility, but don't be too bad that you'll be fired and you'll end up in a good place in the end.
I wonder if he's trying to poke fun at any specific editors at maybe Marvel or DC. It's like, man, that editor really should have stepped in, but they just like let anything go. But now that editor is forced to like fire somebody, but the editor doesn't want to, and so the editor is going to get someone else to do that.
Or it's like, oh, we got this big story coming up, and you haven't actually been the editor for one of these big stories before, so why don't you take that one?
So yeah, there's definitely, I think, something going on behind the scenes that Jim Starlin is upset about and is taking it out in the form of this graphic novel here. And it makes for a very entertaining story, I thought.
It's just so weird. But I also wonder if the gang and the gang members all have a Mick, MC, in their name. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering if this whole story maybe also partially is aimed at McDonald's.
Right, because it's the McBanger mob and food outlet. Yeah. And so they've come up with a new change that is going to revolutionize the taste of food or something. And spoiler alert, at the end of the issue, we find out it's just a barbecue sauce.
It's a new sauce.
And they want to make sure that someone has a patent on it, so it's not going to fall in the wrong hands. I think it's really funny.
Yeah, one more piece of commentary that is built into the story is that they know of the Thing and the Hulk because they capture Earth transmissions, right? So and they say like the greatest horror show that they ever watch is, quote, the 6 o'clock news.
Yeah, you could certainly call the 6 o'clock news horror story, especially in 2020 here.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. I found that the Hulk and the Thing... Oh, first of all, the Hulk gets given some sort of... some sort of medication to lower his temper so he's actually manageable.
Yes.
So he talks with the Thing, and while he doesn't have his intelligence... He still speaks in his sentences and comes up with some ideas and stuff.
Yeah, and I feel like that is while the story is fun and it's pretty good, it still feels really constrained and rushed. And that's one point where I think that they just sort of toss in, one of these magical plot points to make it work. Another one was, you need to find Mal Addy, so I'll just beam the location into your brains,
Yeah.
and then they just know where to go.
Right. Well, I think also the reason for the Hulk is to stay in continuity with what's happening in the rest of the Marvel Universe, because he was going through a very savage time at this time, and I think they just needed to tone that down for the story,
Right.
And give an explanation of why he's acting the way he is. But I still thought that Hulk acted as the Hulk would,
Yeah.
and the Thing still acted as the Thing would.
Totally.
They just were written a little goofier than usual.
Yeah, and they didn't have any sort of reason to fight each other.
Right. And the Thing is played as the straight man in this one. And the Hulk, especially with the hat.
hat.
They need a disguise, so the Hulk just squashes an alien and puts it on his head.
Alien
and,
squid.
Yeah,
and then he has to punch it out when it starts to wake up again.
yeah. It's like, come back here, hat. And so I just found some of that humor, it was actually really funny. And Bernie Wrightson is actually really good at portraying the comedy in picture form, because comedy is actually really hard to do in comics, because you don't get the inflection of the voice to portray your jokes.
Yeah.
It is specifically body language.
Right.
That especially with the Hulk, and that really comes across well here. Not everybody can do that.
And even body language is interpreted through the motion of the body, and you can't get that in picture form.
Right. Yeah. And the comedy also is a lot of sitcoms rely on a laugh track to make things funnier,
Right.
or the
point out when it
music
should
or
be
cues,
funny.
and
Yeah.
but you don't get any of that. It's really specifically the artist's job to make it funny, and Bernie is really good at that, I think. So. Yeah, other than the fact that it starts off the whole epic collection on a really odd note, I enjoyed this graphic novel.
Yeah.
I did.
Well, on page 9, I think 9 and 10, there's something that could actually give some evidence that this is aimed at DC, and that's that there's a Superman reference.
Okay, I didn't notice that. What is the Superman reference?
So there's the guy who's building the giant Thing statue in the middle of Utah, which is just bizarre.
Yes.
It's and somehow this has cost him 2 marriages, it says.
Because he spends all of his time making the statue.
But why would somebody marry him?
Knowing he's in the middle of the
Knowing he's in
statue. Yeah, right.
Anyway, so he's just completed this masterpiece, and all of a sudden he hears this big crashing noise coming toward him, and he looks, and it's talking about faster than a bullet, stronger than a train.
Oh, yeah, that's
able to
right. Yeah,
leap
yeah.
really high, and then he goes. Up there in the sky, I don't believe it. Maybe it's a bird. No such luck. Maybe it's a plane. No, planes don't just bounce like that.
Yeah, I forgot about that moment. That's funny.
Yeah. But it's very strange the way that it's done, because the first part, just the grammar is odd. It says more faster than a bullet and much more stronger than a train.
Because they wanted to say it's not faster than a speeding bullet, it's more faster than a
that's right.
speeding bullet.
This is better
the
than-
Hulk can beat Superman, no
That's right.
problem.
Yeah, this is better than that.
Okay, well, why don't we get into our actual issues?
Yes.
Fantastic Four proper. Starting with issue number 308, and we are introduced to a brand new villain. I think this is the first new villain that Steve Englehart has come up with for the Fantastic Four. His name is Facade.
Yes.
And he is a Middle Eastern oil tycoon who he kind of controls the stock market based on his own purchases and sales.
Right. So he's the oil minister of a country called Akiria, and he has sort of manipulated the stocks through convincing people to buy and sell shares and that kind of thing, the oil representatives from the other countries. So he's sort of manipulating those people to manipulate the value in his favor.
Right. And I don't know if this is a ripped from the headlines kind of a story. I have no idea of the cultural relationship between America and the Middle East in terms of oil in 1987. So, but it seems so specific that it may be something that people would have related to at this time.
Well, it mentions OPEC. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting and petroleum exporting companies, and that is a real group.
Okay. Yeah, I think, yeah. So I do have a clip of Steve Englehart talking about the creation of this character from an interview that I did with him a couple of years back. So I will insert a little bit there.
Well, this was the last half of the 80s.
Yep.
Saudi Arabia was, an oil, oil for cars and gasoline and stuff. That had sort of come into people's consciousnesses in the 80s. And, I just thought, well, there's an interesting thing. And I will say about Facade, the only thing I'll say there, somebody said to me, it didn't immediately cross my mind, but somebody said, people in Saudi Arabia wear suits. They don't wear,
their traditional headdress.
Traditional hooded, I was going to say burqas, but that's not it. But, and so I said, and I remember I said in the art directions when we were creating the character, I said, don't put him, in a burqa. And then,
Oops.
and then they did. Well, I don't know burqa, but I mean, don't put him in the traditional thing. And then it kind of went there. But otherwise, it's like Dr. Doom is the head of Latveria, over on the Master of Kung Fu side of things. I've always said that I see Fu Manchu as kind of the Dr. Doom of the Chinese, not the representative of the Chinese people. He's a supervillain. He just happens to be Chinese. So Facade was a supervillain. He just happened to be, Middle Eastern.
Yeah.
I don't think we were big fans of the Saudi Arabians at that time, but I mean, I wasn't trying to do anything particularly political there. I just thought, here's a part of the world that hasn't been used yet, and they could have their own supervillain,
One interesting thing about Facade is that this is his first appearance and almost his last appearance. It looks like he's only ever been in these 3 issues of Fantastic Four, and then 2 issues of a Union Jack series in 2006.
Was that 2006 around Civil War or something? No, 2006 isn't Civil War.
No, there were a bunch of miniseries on these on these UK characters, probably to do with like copyright renewal and that kind of thing. But yeah, so he showed up in one of those.
That's funny.
Yeah, he was helping basically like a offshoot of AIM called RAID, Radically Advanced Ideas in Destruction or something like that.
Well, I feel like Facade is kind of an out-of-date character. Well, first, actually, I should explain that he comes out of a TV. He at one point he stabbed a TV camera and the circuitry
supercharged him.
Yeah, and then he became pure energy that travels through TVs.
Right.
And I feel like he's an out-of-date character for a couple of reasons. One, TVs don't act like this anymore,
right,
with the sort of the static and the vertical hold or whatever that they kind of portray him as here. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is just kind of the portrayal of Middle Eastern people or whatever,
right,
is something that I think people are they step on eggshells around that these days. So they wouldn't want to portray them like this. Yeah,
I believe in the Union Jack issues, he regains a solid, more normal form.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The big story here is that the Fantastic Four are called to investigate this Facade guy, and they eventually have a fight against him in the TV station. And Johnny is knocked off of the top of the building unconscious, so he can't flame on and save himself. And Miss Marvel goes to save him. She leaps out of the building to catch him as he falls, but then at the last second can't stand the thought of actually catching him because he's a man and she has these issues with her PTSD. And so ends up not saving him. One of the big gripes that people have about this period of Fantastic Four, and we heard this in the comments, is that the Sharon, or no, I guess we didn't hear it in the comments, but the Sharon goes on and on about how she doesn't like to be touched by men, and it becomes kind of annoying and overbearing. And there's a couple, and even Ben makes one comment. She's like, she's going to drive me crazy with all this talk at one point. And there's a couple things to be said about that. One is that you can't just turn off a psychological issue.
Especially one as traumatic as this.
Yeah, she's definitely suffering some PTSD in which she needs some sort of counseling that she's not getting. And you can't expect someone to just snap out of it. Like, that's not how it works. The other thing to keep in mind also is just this is the way the comics were written back then, is that in order to keep readers up to date, you have to restate things in every single issue.
Right. So you never know when you're going to get a new reader.
Yeah. And so, yes, we are going to find out about Sharon's issues with men in every single issue, because that's just how they wrote things back then.
And I have to give Steve Englehart some props here, because he's trying to address a very serious issue, and that is the lasting impact that rape has on its victims. And it's not something that's talked about very much, and I think he's trying to address that, but either he doesn't know how to address it, or he's playing through the Thing, who clearly doesn't really know how to address it, and Sharon herself doesn't know how to address it, and that just makes it really kind of muddled, and there's some sort of mixed messages going on through these characters.
Yeah, and I can understand Thing, like if he's really writing how Thing would relate to it, and like because he can't relate to it, he doesn't know anything about this. Like at one point he's like, "Look, lady, men didn't hurt you. Some men hurt you,
Yeah.
but Johnny didn't hurt you.
Yeah.
So you should have saved him."
Yeah.
But like that,
and you just gotta toughen up and shape up, and that's a very like Ben Grimm-esque type of way to handle things.
Yeah. But it's not like, psychological issues are often not logical.
Yeah.
Like she is not thinking rationally
Yeah.
because of a traumatic experience. It's like you wouldn't tell a shell-shocked army vet to just snap out of your PTSD. Just like, hey, there are no guns here. You don't have to be worried, that kind of thing. Like, there's no bombs going off. Stop acting like you're acting. And it's like, no, they have to work through the horrific stuff that they went through.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, like I said, I think it's admirable that he's trying, and for whatever reason, it's just not really coming together.
And so, one of the reasons why Thing brings her on the team is so that, he would have his companion, because they have a great relationship in the ongoing series, and he wants to rekindle that and stuff, but now she's not the way he wants her to be, so he's getting frustrated with that.
Right. Yeah, so in this issue, Ben makes some very strange leadership decisions. For one, he is very reckless with the Fantastic Car.
Right.
And they don't take the side pods at all. They just take the front and the back, which is kind of weird. But
I think that's because Crystal and they don't know how to fly it. They haven't been trained on that kind of stuff.
Also, it might be that Reed and Sue took some of them.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, I've never thought of that. But anyway, he flies it into the side of this building, like right through the wall. It's like, we got to get there quickly. And so he just flies it into the side of the wall. But it's like, how did you know that was the right room?
Right, yeah.
And then he tells Crystal and Johnny to watch the reporter Dunbar and keep an eye on him. And he and Sharon were going to go to Akuria to see if they can find Facade or track down some sort of trace of him. But then they all leave the TV station together. So who's watching Dunbar? But then this is an example of Ben starting to feel the weight of leadership and understand what the decisions that Reed made a little better, have a little more empathy for him.
Yeah, and I'm glad he's making these mistakes, because he was thrown into this with very little training and such, and he just doesn't know how to do it.
And he's not a good leader.
No, he's not. His first thing to do when he was in charge was to bring on two characters, one woman to make him feel good and one woman to make Johnny feel bad. And those are terrible decisions to make.
The team dynamic aside, that's still a bad decision, but yeah. Oh man. So, but luckily we see the team sort of start to gel a little bit better. But then, again, having the decision to split up into these two groups was also motivated by in the same way.
Yeah.
So he can be close to Sharon, and so that Crystal could be close to Johnny, and that's also not a great way to do things.
And man, it comes to a head in this next issue.
Right. So issue 309 is called Danger on the Air. We get a quick recap of the last issue because this clearly continues. And then we have The Thing and Miss Marvel as they go to Akuria to meet with the king and the American ambassador. And we also have Johnny and Crystal and Alicia back in New York, who are just sort of hanging out, waiting for Facade to strike again.
And their dinner conversation is really interesting. They have dinner together. Johnny invites Crystal over, and the words he uses are, I figured rather than leave her to grab an early lunch alone from the FF's kitchen, we could make it a threesome. And like, Johnny,
What?
you're
That
just...
is so old, Johnny.
And that's just like, if Alicia wasn't already wondering, like there's just the little subtle innuendos there that she probably doesn't appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they're having their dinner, it comes out in the conversation that that Crystal was actually the one who broke up with Johnny, and Alicia had always thought that it was Johnny that broke it off with Crystal, which means that possibly she wonders if Johnny still has feelings for Crystal, which of course he does.
Right. Yeah. And so, as part of this conversation, we have a flashback to Fantastic Four number 45, which is where they first meet Crystal and the Inhumans. We also get a flashback of Johnny and Alicia early in their relationship, but this is not from any previous issue. This is new material here.
Both this issue and the last issue were drawn by John Buscema, and he changes the way that he draws Facade a little bit. In the previous one, he was very stiff and almost kind of two-dimensional. He looked like a 1980s video game type of a character. Mm-hmm. And in this issue, he renders him a little bit more realistically. He's got different, you can see him from different angles, different points of view, and he just looks more like a full person rather than a static image.
Yeah, they also change his color quite a bit too.
Right. Yes.
And if you've never had one of those really old TVs, there's a tint knob, and actually there's probably a tint setting still on your modern TVs. And if you play around with the tint setting, then you can see the colors, the main color of everything sort of cycle through like a rainbow, and you have to try and find the right tone that goes around with the picture. Mm-hmm. And so that's what they're probably doing here with the coloring. What some younger readers of this may not realize is how Johnny and Crystal stop Facade. They are having a lot of difficulty, and then Crystal's like, wait a minute, I'll make some clouds, you shoot some heat up into the sky, we're going to make a huge thunderstorm, and then he just sort of like fizzes out. And this is because back in the early 80s, most television, even if it was cable TV, in order to go from across large distances, was transmitted along radio waves. And radio waves, unlike satellite, the way we beam to satellites now and stuff, radio waves are disrupted by heavy cloud cover because I don't know all the science here, but based on the way that they either reflect off of the clouds or penetrate through the clouds or whatever, it just creates a lot of interference. And so they create this large thunderstorm so that there's interference between Facade and wherever he is, quote, broadcasting from.
Yeah, that's another instance of this being a very outdated character. And can you imagine someone like Kamala Khan, if she appears now, if Facade ever appeared now, and she fought him, she would never come up with an idea like this because she's never experienced a TV like that before.
Yeah, I'd be like, where's the HDMI cable?
Yeah.
One thing that was kind of confusing to me about this issue was the back and forth between the narration being in text boxes and being in sort of the negative space between panels. Because if I am reading text that continues from a box, I'm going to look for it in the next box.
Yeah.
And not, I'm not going to expect it to be in white space above the next panel. For example, on page 93, in the second panel, we get some narration about Miss Marvel, and then when we go into the flashback, we've got the text above the flashback bubble, and then it's in a box, and then from the box, that continues in the fourth panel up to above the fifth panel, and then back into a box in the fifth panel.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it is kind of back and forth. But it still flows. I mean, you can still follow where
it does.
It
just took me a second because, especially the fourth to fifth panel, going from a box, I expected to go to a box.
Yeah.
And then the sentence didn't really make sense. And then I realized, the text is up above.
Right.
So then we reach the end of this issue, and we have the Thing and Miss Marvel who discover a space shuttle in Akuria, even though they're not really known for their space program. And Facade catches up to them because when Johnny and Crystal shorted him out, he reappeared in Akuria and captures Ben and Sharon.
Okay, and that leads us to issue number 310, and this one's called Things to Come. And if you look in the corner box has the new Fantastic Four. I don't know why the last one had Reed and Sue in it, because issue number 308 had Miss Marvel and Crystal in it.
Yeah, and they've been in it for a while.
That's true. So maybe this actually isn't a new thing for this corner box. I just wanted to point out that those heads are the correct heads this time.
That's good.
This issue is drawn by Keith Pollard, but because of Joe Sinnott's inks, you'd never know that there was a difference. I mean, you can still tell that these are not John Buscema faces and such, but
it's got the continuity there.
Joe Sinnott adds so much to just the line quality and the shading and the way things are drawn that there's such a sense of continuity in the artwork between John Buscema and Keith Pollard. It's really good.
Yeah. So we get on the front cover, we get our first glimpse of the new Thing, even though we don't know that yet. The Thing's on the cover, but he looks different. Oh, spoilers. I don't know how I feel about this. On the one hand, it's like, I guess maybe you're trying to attract sales because, what happened to the Thing? But on the other hand, like, this is the big point of this issue.
No, I don't think it is.
No?
I think the big point of the issue is that Miss Marvel changed, which you don't get that on the cover.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we are taken right into the middle of the scene here where the Thing and Miss Marvel are captured by Facade and the King and the American ambassador. They're in cahoots, and that's a big deal because they want the Americans want to test their rocket ships on their land because they can't get anywhere with NASA.
It's more like, if they were to use existing shuttles to send things up into space, they'd have to refit them to meet modern standards, and that costs way too much money.
So go to where the rules are lax.
Right, and then we'll shoot off our old garbage space shuttles into space, and then
and that's what they do, or like at least that's what the Thing and Miss Marvel do, because they commandeer the spaceship in an attempt to get away and blast off into space, where they have a big space battle with a projection of Facade who's trying to control the ship. It's kind of a little ridiculous.
So there's a satellite, and he sort of beams himself to the satellite and starts fighting, and it's weird because why are there missiles on this space shuttle?
Oh, right.
And then the other part is that this satellite that Facade has taken over is supposedly part of the Star Wars defenses, which, if you don't know, is the nickname for the proposed Strategic Defense Initiative, which is a satellite-based anti-nuclear missile system. And it was supposed to have like plasma and particle beam weapons that could shoot out nuclear weapons that were going to threaten the United States.
I really felt the influence of Star Wars in this issue here with the space battle at the end. Mm-hmm. This is the era of Return of the Jedi and Last Starfighter and all of these kind of space things that are happening in the movies right now. And anytime I see space battles like this, it's like, yeah, I feel the Star Wars influence.
Yeah. This issue is just so awkward.
Yeah.
A lot of it is very awkward because on the one hand, we do get what the Thing was looking for. Him trying to get back with Sharon and trying to cause some strife between Alicia and Johnny and Crystal. But then there are other implications and other consequences to this as well, with Sharon sort of being in a traumatic man-hating phase because of what happened to her. And just all sorts of things to just make all of the interactions very awkward.
Yeah, in the end, Ben and Sharon share a kiss, which is kind of awkward as well.
Yeah.
Because this whole time she doesn't see him as a man,
right?
Because he physically looks like a monster,
right? He is a monster who is a friend,
yeah,
and like that's it.
And she can differentiate that because of the way that they look,
right?
That he looks,
yeah. And so, and then Crystal and Johnny are hanging out at the Four Freedoms Plaza, and Alicia comes in and brings them sandwiches. And,
oh man, this is so passive aggressive.
And Alicia goes, or Johnny goes, you didn't have to do that. We've got food at the FF Plaza. And she goes, sure, but I was thinking how boring it must be for you sitting here with Crystal. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean the way that it sounded.
Oh, Crystal, are you standing right there? Yeah. And she's like, I know just how you meant it, Alicia.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much.
Oh man, so awkward. And then Crystal pulls out the business card of the real estate agent that she's been seeing.
Or not that she did see. She had a fling with the guy, but she
Right.
hasn't seen him on a regular basis.
Right, and actually she's been forbidden to see him by the Inhumans.
Yeah.
But she pulls out his business card. She's thinking about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's the drama, the melodrama, right?
Yeah.
That's what Tom DeFalco always says, that we come for the action, but we stay for the melodrama.
Yeah.
And that's what brings people back.
Right. So Sharon and Ben get out into space okay, but in the battle, their shuttle is clearly damaged, and when they head back to Earth, they're bombarded by cosmic rays.
Yeah, a very familiar scene for anyone
Yes.
who has been a fan of Fantastic Four.
Yep, they crash land, and we see the shadowy, spiky figure of Ben in his new form emerge, and we get this giant splash page of his new look. And that would be a great place to end this.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it would be a great cliffhanger right there.
But then you flip the page, and we find in another splash page that that Sharon has also mutated, and that is the end of this issue. What's interesting, I think, here is there's a theory that is sometimes kind of mentioned in the comics and sometimes not. There's a theory that the Fantastic Four's powers were determined by their personalities or their feelings about themselves at the time that they were hit by the cosmic rays. And I think that this supports that theory quite a bit. Because Thing was feeling like he would never be seen as a man again. He's just the Thing. He's unlovable. People can't get close to him. And he needs to also toughen up in order to become the leader he needs to be. And that's what happens to his form. He gets spiky so people can't get close to him.
Literally can't get close to him.
Exactly. He is no longer, he's further from being a man than he ever has been before. And he's now stronger and tougher than he ever was before. And Sharon, she desired to be tougher and stronger, somebody who could stand up to men,
but also someone who wouldn't be desirable to men.
Right. No, exactly.
Also.
She wouldn't be desirable, so they wouldn't lust after her, and they wouldn't want to, attack her or rape her or anything like that. She saw herself as ugly and being unworthy of love or unable to be loved because of this traumatic experience. And that's what she turns into. And it's really interesting because in the next issue she was saying that even though I had these this experience and these thoughts, I could take some sort of solace. I could in my beauty and my looks, and know that I am still a beautiful person, even if my inside is ugly, or something like that.
Right.
And now that's been taken away as well.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting conversation that happens at the beginning of the next issue. So let's go on to 311. It's called "I Want to Die," and the opening here is just her trying to kill herself over and over again, but not being successful because she is now a thing.
This is quite a morbid issue in that sense, and it's a very jarring way to start this issue. I can't imagine what it would be like if this is the first issue that a parent bought for their kids or something.
Right.
And I'm kind of surprised, probably because she can't kill herself. I'm surprised that this got past a lot of the censors. But
so I asked that question specifically to Steve Englehart. So I'll play a clip of him talking about this situation here.
Over in the West Coast Avengers. Sorry, I just wrote a lot of stuff, but
yep.
I did a sequence where Hank Pym was going to commit suicide because he felt like he had, he'd tried 43 different superhero identities and none of them had worked. And so he was going to do himself in. And that was a very popular run. People liked that.
Right.
So, so suicide was not off the table by any means. And again, I've been talking about how much she liked it, but she, the transition was a shock to the system. And you come back to the fact that she's playing off Ben, who is so solid and so, understanding. He's a good guy. And so him getting her through that seemed like a thing. And no, this was, we were getting pretty close to editorial interference, but we weren't there yet. So,
Okay.
it seemed like a good idea, and I did it, and
Nice.
there was no pushback.
So yeah, this is really interesting with Sharon, because she is a very divided character even in herself. While she's not looking for a relationship now, and she doesn't feel like she can get past these emotions of her experiences, she does hold out hope that one day she can become, not that she can get past the traumatic experience of being raped, but that she can become strong enough to trust her own ability to defend herself, which might allow her to have a relationship again.
Right.
And that's a very interesting portrayal, one that I would never think of, that the way to get past this is to just become strong enough to defend yourself, and then it doesn't matter what happened, because it's not going to happen again. And just the tension there between, I want a relationship, but I can't have one, but maybe I can, and even within herself. But now, because she's become a monster, that's clearly gone. And so that's another reason why she wants to kill herself.
Yeah, and Ben tries to reason with her. It's like, I'm a monster, and you liked me, so someone will like you too. And it's like, no, that's not the same thing.
It's totally different for women. And you know what?
Yeah.
In the way that our society is set up, yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
And maybe it shouldn't be, but yeah.
So this issue here, the reason why they're in the middle of the jungle here is because they've crash landed. The rocket
Right.
ship crash landed to Earth, and thank goodness they were things, because they wouldn't have survived otherwise.
Right.
And when you crash in the jungle, you automatically end up in Wakanda.
Yeah.
That's just what happens, you
Yeah.
know. So Black Panther shows up a little while into this issue here. A lot actually happens in this issue, because we have several pages that deal with Miss Marvel turning into this thing.
Yep.
We have
We have a very, very quick recap of the origin of the Fantastic Four. Here's
Right.
the second one for this volume.
Johnny goes to the Middle East to look for Ben and Sharon, and Crystal meets up with Norm, and we'll get
Yep.
into that in a second here.
Yep.
And they have and Ben and Sharon have this big battle with this bright red
Robot
vibranium robot creature, and then to top it all off, Black Panther comes in and shows that Doctor Doom is in Latveria too. Like there's a lot
jam-packed.
going on here.
Yeah.
But Steve Englehart manages to give appropriate time to each of these scenarios.
Very well done.
The only thing that's unnecessary, I think, is the fact that Johnny went to the Middle East.
Right.
Because they spend one page on it, and later on they just call him and say, hey, he's over in Wakanda, and
Go pick
it's
him
like,
up.
they didn't even need to show that. So,
Yeah.
but
I guess they
yeah.
wanted to show that,
That he was concerned
They're concerned and they're doing something.
Yeah, for sure. But it also got Johnny out of, maybe this is the why, it got Johnny
yes.
out of the picture, so he's not snooping around, because Crystal is going to meet up with Norm.
Right.
And that's probably why they needed Johnny to be nowhere obtainable at the time.
Right.
So yeah, they have this meeting with Norm. They bring him back. We haven't seen him since the Scarlet Vision and Scarlet Witch maxi series.
Right.
And it's an interesting conversation, because she's like, we could start something up again. I don't care what the Inhumans say. Like, we should be together.
Yeah, and so also the divorce is approved or put forth or ratified or whatever by Inhuman law, not human courts, because they were married by Inhumans.
And Inhumans say that they can't be divorced.
Right, or at least not yet.
Yeah. And so Norm assumes that she's back with the Human Torch, because that's why she's on the Fantastic Four. And her reaction's like, Johnny? But Johnny Storm's married. and then he says, well, so were you, Crystal, when we hooked up. It's like,
Yeah.
touche.
That is not a good excuse, lady.
Yeah, and he kind of walks off and doesn't want to have anything to do with her. It's like, yep, there we go.
Yeah, this has already caused enough trouble in my life.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he walks away, and Roberta's just sitting there behind the desk, and there's this big portrait of Reed Richards on the wall, staring at them.
It's
and
just weird.
He's got a smile, but he's disapproving of this conversation.
you know it.
Oh, so should we talk about Doctor Doom?
Sure.
It's so strange to see him pop up here because,
Yeah.
I mean, it hasn't been that long since we saw him because we saw him in the annual in the previous volume.
Yeah.
But now he's trying to get Black Panther to help him out, trying to appeal to one ruler to another.
Well, not just that, but he's looking for a place he's looking for a refuge. He's looking for a place to stay for a bit.
But he's also looking for resources
That
to
too,
try and
yes.
help overthrow Kristoff and get
Right.
his kingdom back, and he thinks that Black Panther can help him out
Right.
in
So the first-
exchange for some robotics
For technology.
technology.
Yeah. So the first place he goes is to Black Panther, first of all, because he is not allowed in his country. I think he figures that Black Panther will be maybe the most hospitable to him, one king to another.
Yep.
Which is true. And then they sort of start having these negotiations. It's interesting. Doom has a conversation with Sharon, and he says a lot of things that I think are similar to what Ben said, but because he's much more eloquent in his delivery, he's a lot more confident. He has a lot more conviction in when he says it. It's a little more effective.
Well, the reason it's effective is because he's trying to recruit her
Right.
to destroy the Fantastic Four.
But the point is, I mean, that part wasn't effective. But the other part I think was, and it's just he's much more charismatic than Ben is.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true.
So even though he says almost or very very similar types of things about you are strong, you can just like get past this and toughen up and whatever. She's more willing to believe him because of the charisma.
Yeah, and he's got nothing to lose by saying this to her.
Right.
Like, she just feels like Ben's trying to just say all the right things.
So that she'll
because
get with him.
she-
Yeah.
Well, no, because he's a friend
or that,
and
yeah.
whatever, but Doom
Or both.
doesn't feel that way at
No,
all. I mean, he
no.
is trying to say the right things so that she will
To
betray
manipulate
the
her. That's right.
Fantastic Four, but she doesn't
Yeah.
have any of it. Yeah, and that is a good little point for her to accept her role in the Fantastic Four as well. So she's willing to kind of push through her current state a little bit to move on and be part of the Fantastic Four again.
So even though she doesn't betray them and join Doom here, she does later on, and we've talked about this in one of our other episodes on
In Walt
volume
Simonson's
20 or 21.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The new Fantastic Four
Yes.
volume.
Right, because in issue 350, Doom promises to change her back, and so she does join with Doom in order to set up a trap for the Fantastic Four.
Yeah, the seeds
Yeah.
of that are planted right here in this issue.
Nice.
I didn't realize that. And that's two writers doing, like, that's Walt Simonson carrying on those threads, so that's
Right.
kind of cool.
Yeah.
And that's like 40 issues later. That's a
Yeah.
sizable amount of
That's
time.
a couple years.
Yep. Okay, so moving on to our last issue of this episode, Fantastic Four number 312. This is a Fall of the Mutants tie-in. It's not really a tie-in.
No,
though.
it's more like an epilogue.
And it's just a guest appearance.
Yeah. And so, very quickly, Fall of the Mutants was a story that spanned X-Men, X-Factor, and New Mutants. It emerged as a result of the Mutant Registration Act and growing hatred or disdain or change in public opinion toward mutants. And Fall of the Mutants actually contains a lot of major events in the X-Men's life. Storm regains her powers. It's the first appearance of Archangel and all of the Apocalypse's horsemen. Caliban becomes the new Death. So he goes from his scrawny little form to his like big, hulking, powerful form. And Doug Ramsey dies.
Right. And also the Beast goes through his transformation.
Yes. So he's infected by pestilence in X Factor, and the way that this infection works is that the more he uses his strength, the dumber he gets. And we see that quite a bit in this issue.
Yeah, he gets paired up with Sharon just by circumstance because Doom uses both of them as hostages, and it's a cool conversation because the Beast we're very not familiar with seeing him in this form. He speaks like a child.
Yeah.
He's kind of regressed to that far.
He still has quite a bit of intelligence. When he starts talking about like neutrinos and stuff like that, but he doesn't necessarily fully understand it, and he approaches it in a very childlike way.
And he realizes, and it's kind of like talking to Franklin, I feel like.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But he realizes that something's going on with him that's bad, but he also realizes that something's going on with Sharon. And he says, something's wrong with me, and every time I use my strength, I get stronger and I get dumber and dumber. And then Sharon says, "We all got problems, Beast." And he yells, "Problems? You stupid monster! You can do something to make sure we don't have problems. All the people in the world will be heard if Doom uses that neutral thing. He'll do something." And she's not willing to do anything because she's so self-absorbed in her own depression at the moment. And he's like, "No, even if it'll make me dumber, I'm going to do something because it's the right thing to do." And she realizes, no, I know what I need to do.
Right. I've got to do it because, he could lose his intelligence to the point where he's a vegetable.
Yeah.
And he's willing to do that.
So I like that. And that kind of shows her, again, is a good progression building on what she learned from Doom in the last issue,
Right.
That she needs to be a more active participant of the team now. And, she's going to accept who she is or what she looks like for now and move on a little bit.
I find it interesting how quickly Black Panther was able to whip up a costume for her.
He has designers that do that for him.
That's right.
His sister Shuri.
Yeah.
Okay, so in this issue also, Doom manages to get into the back door of Reed's secret lab. He has his own secret elevator that he apparently made in issue number 305.
Yeah.
There's a weird note in the editorial box that just says, well, let me just find that here. Where Doom is saying, "I caused a whole range of devices to be secreted into these walls. I monitored everything here until my overthrow. But if I can't benefit from them now, Christoph shall not." And then Ralph Macchio says at the bottom, "Did you realize what was going on in FF 305? The $64,000 question." I didn't.
I totally didn't.
And I looked back at that issue, and I still don't know. Like, it doesn't really give you any clues. It's just at one point, at the end of the issue, Doom just shows up there. And he has his reasons, which are told in the annual number 20, but...
Or you think they're told in the annual.
Right, but we have... It's like, it's not obvious, Ralph.
No. That's really his way of saying, we're just going to make this the case.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Ralph puts a lot of editorial boxes in these comics.
There were a lot, yeah.
He really likes to point out the references to things in the past.
Well, so do I, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's true.
For example, the X-Men, or X-Factor, are in a parade. And Black Panther says, "Oh, there's something going on. What is this? Like, clearly it's not just us." And so his ambassador says, "Oh, well, there was an attack from an alien spacecraft, and X-Factor stopped it. And this alien spacecraft is Apocalypse's ship,
Right.
named Ship, which the X-Men would eventually make their base of operations.
X-Factor.
X-Factor would make their base of operations, yeah,
Yep.
for many years, yeah. So that's the indication here that this is right at the end of Fall of the Mutants. This is after the events have taken place. Dr. Doom asks to hitch a ride to America. Because I guess that's where he's going to look for his next person to pull into his schemes.
Well, I figured he wanted to find Reed's secret lab and use the technology there to help him out as well.
Well, there's that, yes. But anyway, he wants to come to America. And so on their way, Black Panther wonders if America's actions towards Captain America would affect their reaction to Doom coming into America. And so this is a reference to what's going on in the Captain America series right now, where he's been removed from the Captain America position by the government, and Steve Rogers
and
now,
branded a traitor.
Yes, and branded a traitor, and he now goes by the Captain, wearing his like black costume.
Yep.
And John Walker is Captain America.
Right.
And I'm not sure exactly how that plays into what he's sort of supposing here. The comment didn't really make sense to me. It's like, well, if Captain America is considered a traitor, how are they going to treat Doom?
Maybe just the fact that they're willing to turn their back on one of their most celebrated heroes.
Oh, maybe. So then somebody who has always had sort of a questionable relationship with them.
There's no way that they're going to react well to this. Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. Although he does have diplomatic immunity. Well, actually, no, he wouldn't, because
he's not ruler of the country anymore.
right, and Latveria, if they were to ask, would say no, he's a
Imposter.
imposter, yeah,
Right.
which is exactly what all the troops that invade start saying.
Although you have to wonder, Latveria is attacking U.S. soil.
Yeah.
It's not an international incident.
Right.
They just kind of sweep that under the rug.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
But I find the whole thing with John Walker and Steve Rogers kind of funny because when Steve Rogers is the captain, he wears the black costume, and then when he goes back to being Captain America, John Walker takes the black costume, becomes U.S. agent.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, there's a little switcheroo.
Anyway,
well, we did it. We managed to talk for like an hour and 20 minutes or something over these 5 issues and a graphic novel. So
Yeah.
I didn't know. I guess it's we can go on and on about comics.
Yep.
That's great. But so next time we will talk about the rest of this epic collection, and we'll get into Secret Wars 3. And buckle in, is probably going to be a long episode because there's a lot to discuss in these issues here. Mm-hmm. So thank you everybody for checking this out, and you can check us out on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Look for the Epic Marvel Podcast and search for Epic Collections on Facebook, and you can join my Epic Collection group. But other than that, thanks for joining us again, Eric, and we will see everybody next time.
Welcome. Goodbye.